In a world that measures worth by performance and utility, the most profound connections emerge from the spaces between broken dreams. This is the story of a celebrated racehorse, deemed dangerous and worthless after injury ended his career, and the paralyzed teenager who recognized in his fierce spirit a mirror of her own struggle. Their journey together would challenge not only a community's perception of value, but redefine what it means to heal. Sometimes the greatest teachers come with 4 hooves and a wounded heart, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Golden Gate Equestrian Auction hummed with practiced efficiency. On that crisp October morning, wealthy horse owners in tailored riding jackets mingled with ranch hands in worn denim, their conversations punctuated by the auctioneer's rhythmic calls and occasional whinnies from the holding pens. The air carried that distinctive blend of hay leather and ambition that defined these gatherings. In the center display pen, separated from the prime stock, stood a magnificent thoroughbred stallion, once a champion with a Kentucky Derby win to his name. Thunderbolt's commanding presence remained, despite his current circumstances. His gleaming black coat, though well-groomed, couldn't hide the lean frame that had once been pure power. A jagged scar ran down his left hind leg, the visible reminder of the catastrophic breakdown that had ended his racing career 2 years prior. Next up, lot number 36, the auctioneer announced, his enthusiasm noticeably dimming as the spotlight swung to illuminate the stallion. Thoroughbred stallion, Midnight Thunder, age 8, former track champion with proven bloodlines. The clinical description failed to capture the fire still burning in the horse's eyes, or the danger that experienced handlers recognized in his posture. As if sensing the scrutiny, Thunderbolt tossed his head and pawed at the ground, causing the nearest handler to step back cautiously. Starting bid at $3,000, the auctioneer called. This is a Kentucky Derby winner, folks. Potential stud value alone. The silence stretched uncomfortably. A few murmurs circulated through the crowd, followed by a single derisive laugh. That animal's not worth the trailer ride home, someone called from the back. Did you see what he did to Bradley over at Westlake Farms? Broke 2 stable doors and sent 3 handlers to the hospital at Richardson's place, added another voice. From her wheelchair positioned near the side entrance, 16-year-old Caitlin Parker watched the scene unfold, her heart squeezing painfully in her chest. Though she'd only been attending these auctions for a few months, accompanying her Aunt Jessica, who ran a small rehabilitation farm for former racehorses, something about this particular horse captivated her attention. "Aunt Jess," she whispered, tugging at her aunt's sleeve. "Look at him." Jessica Parker glanced down at her niece, then followed her gaze to the agitated stallion. Unlike the others in the crowd, Jessica had built her life around seeing potential where others saw problems. Her Sunrise Meadows rehabilitation farm had successfully retrained dozens of former racehorses for second careers, though their modest operation was always one financial crisis away from closure. "He's dangerous, Caitlin," Jessica said quietly. "Even I can see that." "He's scared," Caitlin countered, her eyes never leaving the horse. "Look at his eyes, not his behavior." In the ring, the auctioneer was struggling to generate interest. "Surely we can start at $2,500, $1,000. Folks, this is a champion bloodline. I'll give you $500, and that's a courtesy to clear your pen," called a heavy-set man near the front, his truck outside, emblazoned with the logo of a Canadian slaughterhouse. The auctioneer's face tightened. "We have $500. Do I hear $600? Silence fell again, broken only by the restless shifting of the horse, who seemed to understand exactly what was happening. "Aunt Jessica, please." Caitlin's voice was urgent now. "We can't let him go to slaughter." Jessica ran a hand through her graying hair, the practical part of her mind racing through calculations. Their small farm was already at capacity with 8 rehabilitation cases. Their funds were stretched thin after the unexpected veterinary bills for the rescue mare that had arrived with pneumonia last month. And this horse, this dangerous, damaged champion, would require resources and expertise they simply didn't. "Have 550, a voice called out, and Jessica realized with shock that it was her own. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd as people turned to locate the source of the bid. The meat buyer's expression darkened as he spotted Jessica. "Parker, you're out of your mind. That animal will kill someone at your little petting zoo." $600, he countered, turning back to the auctioneer. Caitlin's fingers dug into her aunt's arm, her blue eyes wide with a mixture of hope and apprehension. $650, Jessica responded, her voice steadier now, despite the rational part of her brain screaming about financial responsibility. A murmur spread through the crowd. Most knew Jessica and respected her work, even if they considered it somewhat quixotic. The meat buyer shook his head in disgust. $700, and I'm doing you a favor taking that menace off your hands. Jessica hesitated, her resolve wavering. $700 was more than they could afford to spend today, especially on such a high-risk case. $750, said a clear voice. That wasn't Jessica's. All heads turned toward Caitlin, who had wheeled herself forward, her gaze locked with the stallions across the auction floor. The teenager held up a small envelope. "It's my physical therapy fund," she explained without looking at her aunt. "Grammy said it was for healing." A hush fell over the auction house, the kind of silence that acknowledges the witness of something unexpected. The meat buyer looked between the horse and the girl in the wheelchair, then shook his head and turned away, unwilling to compete with whatever was happening. $750 going once, the auctioneer called, his professional demeanor softened by the moment unfolding before him. $750 going twice, sold to the young lady for $750s. As Jessica completed the paperwork, her mind swirling with equal parts dread and resignation, Caitlin wheeled herself as close to the holding pen as she could get. The horse, still agitated from the auction experience, snorted and paced at the far side of the enclosure. "His name isn't Midnight Thunder anymore," Caitlin said when her aunt returned. "It's Phoenix," Jessica raised an eyebrow. "A bit on the nose, don't you think? Rising from the ashes and all that?" Caitlin shook her head, watching as the stallion finally stilled, his ears flicking toward her as if hearing his new name. "It's not just about him," she said softly, unconsciously rubbing her unfeeling legs. "It's about both of us." Loading Phoenix proved to be the first major challenge. The horse balked at the trailer entrance, rearing and fighting, despite the experienced handler's best efforts. After nearly an hour of failed attempts and rising tensions, Jessica was beginning to think they'd have to find alternative transportation. "Let me try," Caitlin said, wheeling herself to where the handlers stood sweating and frustrated. "Absolutely not," Jessica replied, the fear in her voice unmistakable. "He's too unpredictable." "He's just afraid," Caitlin insisted. "Please, Aunt Jess." "I can't explain it, but I understand him." Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps Jessica recognized something genuine in her niece's conviction, but eventually she nodded to the handlers to step back, while keeping herself positioned to intervene if necessary. Caitlin wheeled herself to about 15 feet from the trailer entrance, then stopped. Instead of approaching further or calling to the horse, she simply sat quietly. Phoenix, still tethered to the lead rope, but now without active pressure, tossed his head and pawed the ground. "Hey there," Caitlin said after several minutes had passed, her voice low and conversational. "I know everyone's been pulling and pushing at you. That's not going to happen with me. I couldn't even if I wanted to." The horse's ears flicked toward her, his agitated movements slowing slightly. "You and I, we're kind of stuck," she continued. Me in this chair, you with whatever's going on in that head of yours, but I think maybe we can figure something out together. To the astonishment of everyone watching, Phoenix took a single step, toward Caitlin, then another. The teenager remained still, allowing him to approach at his own pace. When he reached her, stretching his neck cautiously, she slowly raised her hand, palm up. Your choice, she said simply. The stallion's velvet muzzle brushed her palm, his breath warm against her skin. For just a moment, horse and girl remained connected in that gentle touch, creating a small island of calm in the chaos of the auction grounds. Ready to go home? Caitlin asked. Phoenix followed her wheelchair to the trailer without resistance and loaded himself with only a moment's hesitation at the ramp. As Jessica secured the trailer, she caught sight of her niece's face, animated with a hope she hadn't seen since before the accident. Something told her that regardless of the challenges ahead, something profound had just begun. The drive back to Sunrise Meadows was mostly silent, both aunt and niece lost in their thoughts about what awaited them. As they turned onto the gravel road leading to their modest farm, Jessica finally spoke. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You know this isn't a fairy tale, right? That horse has serious issues. He's injured, traumatized, and potentially dangerous. Caitlin nodded, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. I know. Just like me. Sunrise Meadows Farm sprawled across 15 acres of rolling Virginia countryside, its weathered buildings speaking to years of careful but limited maintenance. Unlike the gleaming stables and manicured paddocks of professional racing operations, Jessica Parker's rehabilitation center operated on passion, volunteer labor, and perpetually tight finances. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as Jessica's truck and trailer rumbled up the gravel driveway. 3 dogs of indeterminate heritage raced alongside, barking excitedly at the new arrival. In the distance, several horses grazed peacefully in the autumn-browned pasture. Home, sweet home, Jessica murmured, pulling to a stop near the main barn. She glanced at Caitlin, concerned by her niece's pallor. Are you feeling okay? Just tired, Caitlin admitted. The excitement of the auction had drained her more than she wanted to acknowledge. Managing her energy was a constant balancing act since the car accident 14 months ago that had severed her spinal cord. Before Jessica could respond, a tall, lanky figure emerged from the barn. Marcus Hendricks, their part-time stable hand, approached with his characteristic unhurried stride, pushing back his worn baseball cap to reveal a tanned face weathered beyond his 26 years. Successful shopping trip, he called, then paused when he noticed the unexpectedly high-end trailer they'd borrowed for the auction. Who've we got back there? Jessica climbed out of the truck, her expression communicating volumes. Midnight Thunder. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. The Derby winner? The one who put Jim Richardson in the hospital last month? The very same, Jessica confirmed, though he's going by Phoenix now, according to his new owner. She gestured toward Caitlin, who was transferring herself from the truck to her wheelchair. With practiced movements, Marcus's expression shifted from surprise to concern as he took in the situation. Just no offense, but have you lost your mind? We don't have the facilities for a horse like that, or the insurance. I'm well aware, Jessica replied grimly, but here we are. Caitlin wheeled herself over, her face set with determination despite her fatigue. He deserves a chance, Marcus, no different than the others. Marcus had been working at Sunrise Meadows long enough to know when an argument was futile. Well, we'd better get him settled before dark. Where are you putting him? The end stall in the quarantine barn, Jessica decided. It's the most secure. and keeps him away from the others until we know more about his temperament. She turned to Caitlin. You should head inside. It's getting cold and you've had a long day. I want to help settle him in, Caitlin protested. Not tonight, Jessica's tone brooked no argument. That connection at the auction was remarkable, but we need to be smart about this. Let's get him familiar with his surroundings first. Caitlin recognized the firm line of her aunt's jaw and knew further debate was pointless. Fine, but promise. You'll be careful with him. No chains, no force. We'll be gentle, Jessica assured her. Now go on in. Tanya left a casserole in the oven. As Caitlin reluctantly wheeled herself toward the modest farmhouse, Marcus and Jessica approached the trailer cautiously. So what's the plan here? Marcus asked quietly. Because from what I hear, this horse has rejected every trainer who's tried to work with him since his injury. Jessica shook her head. Honestly, I have no idea. I just know I couldn't let him go to slaughter, not with Caitlin watching. She paused, her voice lowering. You know how she's been since the accident. Today was the first time I've seen that spark in her eyes in over a year. Understanding softened Marcus's expression. Sometimes the broken ones recognize each other, he said, surprising Jessica with his insight. Let's get your problem child unloaded. To their relief, Phoenix allowed himself to be led from the trailer with minimal resistance. The stallion's ears flicked nervously as he surveyed his new surroundings, but he followed Marcus to the quarantine barn without incident, his powerful muscles tensed beneath his gleaming coat. The quarantine facility stood apart from the main barn, designed to house new arrivals or sick animals. The end stall Jessica had chosen featured reinforced walls and a small attached paddock with solid fencing, originally built for a particularly clever escape artist they'd rehabilitated. Years earlier, as they settled Phoenix with fresh water and hay, Jessica studied him with a professional eye. Despite his fearsome reputation, she could see the physical toll his injury and subsequent stress had taken. His muscular frame held hints of the weight loss that often accompanied chronic pain and anxiety. The scar on his left hind leg told of excellent veterinary care, but also suggested the reason for his dramatic behavioral change. I'll have Dr. Walsh come out tomorrow, she told Marcus as they secured the stall door. I want a complete evaluation before we make any decisions. In the warm kitchen of the farmhouse, Caitlin watched their movements through the window, anxiously noting every detail of Phoenix's body language. Though exhaustion pulled at her, she remained vigilant until she saw her aunt and Marcus leave the quarantine barn and head toward the main house. Only then did she allow herself to eat the dinner Tanya, their neighbor and occasional volunteer, had prepared. Jessica entered, stamping mud from her boots and looking every one of her 45 years. He's settled for now, she reported, washing her hands at the sink. Seems to be checking out his surroundings. No signs of immediate distress. I told you he just needed the right approach, Caitlin said, unable to keep the satisfaction from her voice. Jessica fixed her with a steady gaze as she served herself from the casserole dish. Caitlin, I need you to listen carefully. What happened at the auction was remarkable, but it doesn't mean this horse is fixed or safe. He has a history of unpredictable aggression, and we need to proceed with extreme caution. I know that. Caitlin bristled. I'm not stupid. I never said you were. Jessica sat across from her niece, her expression softening. But I need to understand what you're hoping for here. This isn't like the therapy horses at the rehabilitation center. Phoenix can't be your riding horse, honey. The words landed like stones in the quiet kitchen. Caitlin's hand tightened around her fork. You think I don't know that? You think I forgot for 1 second that I'll never ride again? That's not what I meant. I saved him because nobody else would, Caitlin continued, emotion making her voice shake. Because everyone looked at him and saw something broken and worthless, something to be thrown away. The unspoken parallel hung between them. Jessica reached across the table to cover her niece's hand with her own. You are not broken or worthless, Caitlin Ann Parker, and neither is that horse, but pretending his problems don't exist won't help either of you. The fight seemed to drain from Caitlin's shoulders. I just want to help him, Aunt Jess. Maybe if I can fix him, it'll feel like something can be fixed. The raw honesty of the admission made Jessica's heart ache. Oh, sweetheart. Later, that night, after Caitlin had gone to bed, Jessica sat at her cluttered desk, reviewing Phoenix's auction paperwork and what little medical history had been provided. The official documents painted a stark picture: a catastrophic breakdown during training, emergency surgery to save his life but not his career, followed by increasingly aggressive behavior during recovery and failed rehabilitation attempts. Soft knock at the office door interrupted her reading. Marcus stood there, his lanky frame leaning against the door jamb. Just finished the night check, he reported. Our new guest is restless but contained. Jessica rubbed her tired eyes. Thanks for staying late. I appreciate your help with this situation, Marcus shrugged. For what it's worth, I get why she connected with him. Do you? Jessica looked up. That horse was a champion. Then one bad step, one injury, and suddenly he's worthless to the racing world. All that heart, all that fight, now it's just labeled as dangerous and problem behavior. Marcus's gaze drifted toward the hallway where Caitlin's bedroom lay. Can't imagine why that would resonate with a teenager who was a competitive equestrian before ending up in a wheelchair. Jessica exhaled slowly. When did you get so insightful? Always have been. You just never listened to me. His grin took the sting from the words. Get some sleep, Jess. Tomorrow we start figuring out if we've rescued a horse or adopted a tornado. After Marcus left, Jessica stood at her window looking out at the quiet farm, the quarantine barn just visible in the moonlight. Whatever challenges tomorrow would bring. Tonight her niece had gone to sleep with purpose in her heart for the first time in 14 months. For now, perhaps that would have to be enough. Dr. Elaine Walsh arrived at Sunrise Meadows shortly after dawn, her weathered veterinary truck kicking up dust along the gravel driveway. At 58, she had spent over 3 decades treating everything from backyard ponies to million-dollar performance horses throughout Virginia's horse country. Little surprised her anymore, though Jessica's late-night call about their newest rescue had certainly raised her eyebrows. She found Jessica waiting by the quarantine barn, thermos in hand, and dark circles under her eyes suggesting a restless night. Morning, Elaine greeted, accepting the offered coffee. How's our celebrity patient? See for yourself, Jessica nodded toward the stall. Phoenix stood in the corner, his posture alert but not aggressive. Unlike many troubled horses who paced incessantly, he remained unnervingly still, watching them with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Handsome devil, Elaine remarked, setting down her coffee to retrieve her medical bag from the truck. Hard to believe this is the same horse that put Jim Richardson in traction. That's what worries me, Jessica admitted. He's been almost too calm since we unloaded him. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Elaine approached the stall cautiously, her experienced gaze assessing Phoenix's body language. Let's see what we're working with before we make any judgments. The examination that followed required patience and precision. Elaine explained each step before she performed it, allowing Phoenix to adjust to her presence. The stallion remained, tense but tolerant, as she checked his vital signs and basic condition. His overall health is surprisingly good, considering what he's been through, she noted, running experienced hands along his legs. When she reached the scarred left hind leg, Phoenix flinched, but didn't strike. There's definitely residual. On pain here. She continued her examination, taking her time with the more sensitive areas. The surgical repair itself looks excellent, but I suspect there's nerve damage that wasn't addressed. That would explain both the pain response and possibly some of his behavioral issues. As Elaine worked, the farmhouse door opened and Caitlin appeared, maneuvering her wheelchair down the ramp Marcus had built last year. Despite the early hour, she was fully dressed, clearly eager to check on Phoenix. "How's he doing?" she called as she approached. Careful to keep her voice low and calm, Elaine glanced at Jessica, who nodded permission for her niece to join them. "He's in better shape than I expected," the veterinarian answered honestly. "But there are some concerns." Caitlin wheeled herself to the stall door, positioning herself where Phoenix could see her clearly. The horse's ears immediately flicked forward, his attention shifting from the veterinarian to the girl. "He remembers you," Elaine observed with interest. "We understand each other," Caitlin said simply. Elaine finished her examination and stepped back, wiping her hands on a towel. "I'd like to take some x-rays of that left hind leg. There's something not quite right with how it healed." While Elaine retrieved her portable x-ray equipment, Jessica knelt beside Caitlin's wheelchair. "Dr. Walsh thinks he's still in pain from his injury. That might explain some of his aggressive behavior." Caitlin nodded, unsurprised. "Makes sense. When my back spasms get bad, I'm not exactly pleasant to be around either." The x-ray process proved more challenging than the initial exam. Despite Caitlin's calming presence, Phoenix grew increasingly agitated as Elaine positioned the equipment. When she attempted to place the plate against his injured leg, he snorted and shifted away. "This isn't working," Elaine said after the third attempt. "We might need to sedate him." "Wait," Caitlin interjected. "Let me try something." Jessica looked hesitant, but Elaine, intrigued by the connection she'd observed between girl and horse, nodded. Caitlin wheeled herself closer to the stall door. "Hey, Phoenix," she said softly, "I know this is scary. Medical stuff always is." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a long surgical scar on her forearm. "See this? I've got plenty more." "Where that came from?" "The doctors had to put me back together with rods and screws after the accident." Phoenix's ears remained locked on her, his breathing gradually steadying. "The thing is," Caitlin continued conversationally, "we can't fix what we don't understand. Dr. Walsh needs to see inside your leg, just like my doctors had to see inside me." She gestured to Elaine. "Could I have a pair of gloves?" Surprised, Elaine handed her a pair of latex gloves. Caitlin pulled them on and reached into her pocket, producing a few sugar cubes she'd smuggled from the kitchen. "This is technically bribery," she admitted to Phoenix, holding a cube on her flattened palm. "But sometimes bribery works." As the horse cautiously lipped the sugar from her hand, Caitlin continued talking, her voice a soothing stream of consciousness about her own medical experiences. Slowly, the tension drained from Phoenix's powerful frame. "Try now," she told Elaine without looking away from the horse. "But talk him through it. Tell him exactly what you're doing." Skeptical but willing, Elaine approached again, narrating her movements. "I'm going to place this plate against your leg, big guy. It won't hurt, but it might feel cold." To everyone's amazement, Phoenix allowed the procedure, though his muscles quivered with the effort of remaining still. Caitlin continued her gentle monologue until all the necessary x-rays were completed. "Well," Elaine said as she packed up her equipment an hour later, "I've been treating horses for 30 years, and I've never seen anything quite like that." Back in the farmhouse kitchen, Elaine laid out the x-ray films on the table, pointing to several areas of concern. "The surgical repair of the suspensory ligament is textbook perfect. But see this?" She indicated a faint shadow near the joint. "There's a bone fragment pressing against the nerve. It's small, but in exactly the wrong place." "Can it be fixed?" Caitlin asked immediately. Elaine hesitated. "Possibly. It would require..." Another surgery, which carries its own risks, and frankly the cost would be significant. How significant? Jessica asked, though she already knew the answer would exceed their limited resources for this type of specialized orthopedic procedure. Minimum 15,000, probably closer to 20. The figure hung in the air like a lead weight. Jessica ran a hand through her hair, mental calculations creating deeper lines on her forehead. Before you start worrying about surgery, Elaine continued, there's something else we need to address. Pain management. I can prescribe anti-inflammatories. That should provide some relief, but they're not a long-term solution. What about alternative therapies? Caitlin suggested. The rehab center where I did my physical therapy used acupuncture and hydrotherapy. Actually, that's not a bad idea, Elaine nodded. Equine acupuncture might help, and there's a therapeutic swimming facility about 40 minutes from here. Both would be gentler options than constant medication. More expenses, Jessica murmured, though not dismissively. Elaine gathered the x-rays, her expression softening as she looked at Caitlin's determined face. For what it's worth, I think you've got something special with that horse. The way he responds to you. She shook her head slightly. Just be careful. Pain can make even the gentlest creatures unpredictable. After Elaine left, promising to send detailed treatment recommendations, Jessica and Caitlin sat in silence, each processing the morning's revelations. $20,000, Jessica finally said. That's more than the farm cleared all last year. We could fundraise, Caitlin suggested, or maybe Dr. Walsh knows someone who would do the surgery at a discount. Jessica reached across the table to cover her niece's hand. Honey, I think we need to be realistic about what we can provide for Phoenix. Even without surgery, the ongoing therapies, special feed, medications, it all adds up. So what are you saying? That we should give up on him? Caitlin pulled her hand away, her voice rising. That he's not worth it? That's not what I said. Jessica kept her tone even. But we need to think about what's best for Phoenix and what's actually possible with our resources. Caitlin's eyes flashed with a determination Jessica hadn't seen since before the accident. I'll figure something out. I'm not giving up on him just because it's expensive or difficult. The statement hung between them, carrying echoes of Caitlin's own journey, the surgeries, the months of rehabilitation, the ongoing therapies that insurance only partially covered. All right, Jessica finally conceded. We'll start with Dr. Walsh's basic recommendations and see how he responds. But Caitlin, she added seriously, if at any point I feel he's a danger to you or anyone else here, we'll need to reconsider. Agreed? Caitlin nodded, already lost in thought about how to raise the money for Phoenix's surgery. For the first time since her accident, she felt the stirring of purpose, a problem to solve that existed outside the boundaries of her own injuries and limitations. Outside in the quarantine barn, Phoenix stood quietly in his stall, occasionally shifting his weight off his troublesome leg, watching the farm activity through his window with alert, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Word traveled quickly through Virginia's close-knit equestrian community. Within days of Phoenix's arrival at Sunrise Meadows, Jessica's phone began ringing with calls from curious colleagues, concerned friends, and the occasional thrill-seeker hoping to witness the infamous stallion's legendary temper. No, Beth, we're not giving tours, Jessica explained firmly to a local riding instructor who had called for the third time that week. He's not a sideshow attraction. As she hung up, Jessica noticed Caitlin at the kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks, her laptop open to a spreadsheet. For the past 3 days, her niece had thrown herself into researching equine nerve damage with an intensity that both impressed and concerned her. Making progress? Jessica asked, pouring herself a much-needed cup of coffee. Caitlin looked up, excitement evident in her face despite the dark circles under her eyes. I've been talking with people online who've dealt with similar injuries in performance horses. There's a specialist in Kentucky, Dr. Abrams, who pioneered a minimally invasive technique for removing bone fragments like phoenixes. Jessica sat beside her niece, glancing at the meticulous notes. And the cost? Caitlin's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. Still expensive, but potentially less than traditional surgery, around $12,000. She quickly continued before Jessica could respond. But that's not all I've been working on. Look at this. She pulled up a website she had created, Phoenix Rising, Healing a Champion. The site featured the stallion story alongside professional photos Marcus had taken, highlighting both his stunning conformation and the visible scar on his leg. I started a GoFundMe last night, Caitlin explained. We've already raised $800. Jessica blinked in surprise. In one night? People love comeback stories, Caitlin shrugged, and Phoenix has a ready-made audience from his racing. Days. I found his old fan pages and racing stats. He was really something before his injury. Before Jessica could respond, a knock at the door announced the arrival of their first visitor of the day. Tanya Mitchell, their neighbor, and the farm's part-time office manager, entered with her usual flurry of energy, arms laden with grocery bags. "I come bearing supplies," she announced, setting everything on the counter. "And gossip. The whole county's talking about your new project." "We noticed," Jessica replied dryly. "Well, not all attention is bad," Tanya countered, unpacking fresh vegetables and a homemade casserole. "Mitchell Reynolds called. Says he wants to stop by this afternoon." Jessica straightened. Mitchell Reynolds owned Blue Ridge Equestrian Center, one of the most prestigious training facilities in the state. He had been a supportive colleague over the years, occasionally sending donations and referring less competitive horses to Sunrise Meadows for rehabilitation. "Did he say why?" Jessica asked. "Just that he'd heard about Phoenix and was interested in your approach," Tanya replied, filling the refrigerator. "Oh, and that he's bringing his daughter." "Emma?" Caitlin perked up. Emma Reynolds was 19, a rising star in dressage who had recently qualified for the U.S. equestrian team's development program. Before her accident, Caitlin had attended several of the older girls' clinics, admiring her impeccable riding from afar. Out in the quarantine paddock, Phoenix's routine had begun to take shape. The stallion methodically explored his space each morning, always moving clockwise, always testing the same sections of fencing as if looking for weaknesses. He accepted feed cautiously from Marcus, but remained standoffish with everyone except Caitlin. Under Dr. Walsh's guidance, they had started Phoenix on anti-inflammatory medication and gentle exercise, just walking in the small paddock for now, careful not to strain his injured leg. Caitlin spent hours beside the enclosure, sometimes reading aloud from her books, sometimes simply sitting in companionable silence. That afternoon, the arrival of Mitchell Reynolds's gleaming truck and horse, a trailer, created a stir of activity. Jessica hurried to meet him while Caitlin nervously smoothed her shirt, suddenly conscious of how casual the farm appeared compared to the immaculate facilities at Blue Ridge. Mitchell emerged from his vehicle, his commanding presence softened by a genuine smile. At 50, he remained as fit as the Olympic-level riders he coached, though silver now threaded his dark hair. Behind him, Emma stepped out, her tall, athletic frame moving with the natural grace of someone who had spent a lifetime in the saddle. "Jessica," Mitchell greeted warmly. "Thanks for letting us drop by. Emma hasn't stopped talking about your new project since she heard." "It's hardly a project yet," Jessica demurred, leading them toward the house. "More of an unexpected development." As they walked, Emma fell into step beside Caitlin's wheelchair. Though they had met at various equestrian events, they had never spoken directly. "I followed Phoenix's racing career," Emma said without preamble. "Watched him win at Churchill Downs. He was electric on the track." "You should see his X-rays," Caitlin replied, earning a surprised laugh from the older girl. Inside, over coffee and Tanya's homemade cookies, Mitchell explained his interest. Word is, you've got the only person who can handle midnight thunder, sorry, Phoenix, without getting killed. Caitlin flushed under his direct gaze. It's not really handling. We just understand each other. That's exactly what interests me, Mitchell leaned forward. In 30 years of training, I've learned that horses respond more to who we are than what we do. Technical skill matters, of course, but connection, that's rarer than people think. Jessica eyed him suspiciously. You're not here to buy him, are you? Because he's not for sale. Mitchell laughed. God, no. I have enough high-maintenance animals. In my life. He glanced affectionately at his daughter, who rolled her eyes. Actually, I'm here to offer help. He outlined his proposal. Blue Ridge's facilities included a state-of-the-art therapeutic swimming pool and specialized rehabilitation equipment. Mitchell offered these resources to Phoenix at no cost, along with consultation from his staff veterinarian. Why would you do this? Jessica asked bluntly, always wary of offers that seemed too good to be true. Mitchell's expression sobered. Because 15 years ago, someone did the same for me when my best competition horse shattered his leg. Everyone said to put him down. Instead, I found people willing to try experimental treatments. He smiled. That doomed horse lived another 12 years and sired some of my best performers. After Mitchell and Emma departed, promising to arrange Phoenix's first hydrotherapy session the following week, Jessica found Caitlin in the quarantine paddock, updating Phoenix on the development. It's perfect timing, Caitlin was saying as Jessica approached. The hydrotherapy will help strengthen your leg without putting weight on it. Jessica leaned against the fence. You know, Mitchell's help solves only part of the problem. Even with donated therapy, we're still looking at significant costs for surgery. The fundraiser topped $3,000 this afternoon, Caitlin reported. And I have another idea. She hesitated, then continued. What if we document Phoenix's rehabilitation, like a web series or blog? People love animal rescue stories, and Phoenix already has fans from his racing days. You want to turn this into social media content? Jessica frowned. Not for entertainment, Caitlin clarified quickly. As for education, to show what's possible when you don't give up on an animal others have written off. She glanced down at her wheelchair to show that value isn't always about conventional usefulness. The subtext wasn't lost on Jessica. Since her accident, Caitlin had struggled with her own sense of purpose and worth. In Phoenix's journey, she had found a mirror of her own. It could help with fundraising, Jessica conceded. But Phoenix's well-being comes first. No exploitation for views or donations. Agreed, Caitlin nodded firmly. This is about second chances, not sensationalism. As dusk fell across the farm, Marcus helped Caitlin set up a simple tripod near Phoenix's paddock. Her first video would be understated, just her introducing Phoenix, explaining his injury, and outlining their hopes for his recovery. Ready? Marcus asked, adjusting the camera angle. Caitlin took a deep breath, suddenly nervous. What if nobody cares? What if we can't raise enough? Marcus studied her for a moment. You know what I've learned working with rescue horses? Progress isn't linear. Some days are breakthroughs, some are setbacks. But every day you choose to show up matters. He pressed record, stepping back as Caitlin gathered her thoughts. Behind her, Phoenix moved to the fence line, his ears forward as if listening. Hi, I'm Caitlin Parker, she began, her voice steadying as she spoke. And this is Phoenix. We're both learning how to navigate life after everything changed. This is our story. The morning of Phoenix's first therapy session at Blue Ridge Equestrian Center dawned crisp and clear, autumn colors painting the Virginia countryside in fiery hues. Loading Phoenix into the trailer proved easier than anticipated. The stallion seemed to sense the purpose behind the journey, stepping cautiously but willingly up the ramp, with Caitlin's encouragement from her position near the trailer. Entrance. "I still can't believe we're doing this," Jessica muttered as she secured the trailer door, casting a wary glance at their volatile charge. "Having second thoughts?" Marcus asked, sliding into the driver's seat of their borrowed rig. "About a dozen per minute," Jessica admitted, helping Caitlin into the truck's passenger seat before folding her wheelchair into the back. "But we're committed now." The contrast between Sunrise Meadows and Blue Ridge Equestrian Center couldn't have been more striking. As they passed through the imposing stone entrance gates, perfectly maintained white fencing bordered Olympic-quality arenas. Sleek, powerful. Horses moved across manicured paddocks, their coats gleaming in the morning sun. The main stable, a soaring timber-frame structure with copper accents, looked more like a luxury resort than a working barn. "Don't gawk," Jessica whispered to Caitlin as they were greeted by impeccably dressed staff members. Mitchell Reynolds emerged from the main building, dressed casually in polo shirt and riding breeches, but somehow still exuding the confidence of someone accustomed to moving in international equestrian circles. "Right on time," he called, striding toward them. "We have the therapy wing prepared, and Emma's already warming up in the indoor arena. She's hoping to show Caitlin some of her exercises after your session." Inside the rehabilitation facility, a team of specialists awaited. Dr. Natalie Chen, Blue Ridge's resident veterinarian, Tyler Williams, their equine physical therapist, and two assistants wearing matching Blue Ridge polo shirts. The therapeutic pool dominated the center of the climate-controlled space, a marvel of engineering designed specifically for rehabilitating injured horses. Phoenix's nostrils flared as he took in the unfamiliar environment, his muscles tensing beneath his glossy coat. When one of the assistants approached with handling equipment, the stallion threw his head up warningly. "He doesn't like strangers handling him," Caitlin explained quickly, "especially men." Dr. Chen stepped forward, her movements deliberate and calm. "That's fine. We'll adjust our approach." She turned to the assistants. "Kevin, Sarah, please set up the monitoring equipment, but let Ms. Parker and her team handle the horse directly." The session that followed became a careful dance of professional expertise and Phoenix's particular needs. To everyone's relief, the stallion accepted the specialized flotation vest after Caitlin spent several minutes acclimating him to its touch and smell. The graduated ramp into the therapy pool proved more challenging. "He's never seen anything like this before," Jessica explained, as Phoenix balked at the water's edge, eyes wide with suspicion. "No pressure," Dr. Chen assured them. "First sessions are often just about familiarity." Caitlin wheeled herself to a position where Phoenix could clearly see her. "Remember how I told you about my hydrotherapy sessions?" she said conversationally, as if continuing an earlier discussion. "The water supports your weight so it doesn't hurt to move. It's weird at first, but then feels amazing." To the astonishment of the Blue Ridge staff, Phoenix lowered his head toward Caitlin, blowing softly against her hair in what appeared to be consideration of her words. Then, to everyone's surprise, the stallion cautiously placed one hoof on the submerged ramp. "That's it," Caitlin encouraged, "one step at a time." Over the next 40 minutes, Phoenix gradually entered the pool until he was swimming with the natural grace that had once made him a champion on the track. Tyler, the physical therapist, observed with professional interest as the stallion found his rhythm in the water. "His form is excellent," he noted, tracking Phoenix's movements. "You can see the natural athleticism. And notice how he's not favoring the injured leg in this environment? The buoyancy allows for a full range of motion without pain." Dr. Chen nodded in agreement. "With consistent therapy, we could see significant improvement. The muscles atrophied after injury, but they're responding well to this controlled exercise. Mitchell Reynolds watched from the observation area, his experienced eye missing nothing. "Remarkable progress for a first session," he commented to Jessica. "Most horses take weeks to acclimate to the pool environment. Most horses haven't been through what he has," Jessica replied, or had Caitlin as their advocate. After the session, as Phoenix was being dried and settled in a comfortable guest stall for a rest before the journey home, Mitchell invited them to observe Emma's training session in the indoor arena. "I thought Caitlin might be interested," he explained. "Emma's working with our Paralympic dressage coach today." Jessica glanced at Caitlin, who had been unusually quiet since the therapy session ended. "What do you think? Too much for one day?" "I'd like to watch," Caitlin decided, though her voice betrayed her fatigue. The indoor arena at Blue Ridge rivaled international competition venues with perfect footing and state-of-the-art lighting. As they entered, Emma was executing a flawless half-pass on her gleaming black Hanoverian gelding, under the watchful eye of a stern-looking woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun. "That's Diane Holbrook," Mitchell explained in a low voice, "former Paralympic coach for the U.S. equestrian team. She works with both our able-bodied and para-riders." Caitlin watched in silence as Emma completed her exercises, the horse responding to invisible cues, moving with power and precision. When the session ended, Emma dismounted and approached them, her face flushed with exertion but smiling. "What did you think?" she asked Caitlin directly. "Beautiful," Caitlin answered honestly. "I used to dream of riding like that. Before." She gestured to her wheelchair, the words matter-of-fact rather than self-pitying. Diane Holbrook approached, her assessing gaze taking in Caitlin's posture and upper body strength with professional interest. "You were a rider?" she asked abruptly. "3-day event," Caitlin replied. "Nothing at Emma's level, but I was competitive in regional junior competitions." Diane's response was non-committal. "And what's your injury classification?" The blunt question might have seemed rude coming from anyone else, but Caitlin recognized the technical assessment. T10 complete. No function below the waist, full upper body strength and control. Diane nodded. Grade 1 or 2 para classification, depending on trunk stability. "Have you considered continuing?" The question hung in the air like a stone dropped into still water. Jessica tensed beside Caitlin, protective as always. "Continuing riding?" Caitlin clarified, her voice carefully neutral. "No, that hasn't seemed possible." "Many things seem impossible until they're done," Diane replied. She glanced at Mitchell. "The Farnsworth saddle came in last week, the one with the customized support system and quick-release features. Emma's been testing it." She turned back to Caitlin. "You should see it before you leave. Might be educational." With that cryptic suggestion, she strode away, already calling instructions to another rider entering the arena. "Don't mind Diane," Emma said, falling into step beside Caitlin's wheelchair as they moved toward the tack room. "She's abrupt but brilliant. She's helped several riders return to competition after injuries similar to yours." In the immaculate tack room, Emma showed Caitlin a saddle unlike any she had seen before, the traditional English shape modified, with additional support structures, specialized security features, and adaptive elements that could be customized to a rider's specific needs. "It's designed by a Swedish para-equestrian gold medalist," Emma explained. "Allows riders with various disabilities to maintain proper position and control without relying on leg aids." Caitlin ran her fingers over the fine leather, emotions warring across her face. "I never even thought about adapted equipment. After the accident, everyone just assumed." "People make a lot of assumptions," Emma said simply, "but horses don't care if you cue them with your legs or with your voice and seat. They just want clear communication." The drive back to Sunrise Meadows was quiet, each person lost in their own thoughts. Phoenix traveled contentedly, the therapy session having left him relaxed and calm. Caitlin stared out the window, her mind replaying the day's events. Not just Phoenix's successful therapy, but the unexpected conversation with Diane and the specialized saddle that represented possibilities she had forced herself to stop considering. That evening, after settling Phoenix for the night, Caitlin uploaded new content to the Phoenix Rising website, footage of the stallion's first hydrotherapy session, alongside detailed updates on his condition and their fundraising progress. She hesitated over the keyboard before adding a personal note. Today, Phoenix reminded me that adaptation isn't the same as limitation. Sometimes the path forward looks different than we imagined, but that doesn't mean it isn't worth taking. Within hours, comments began flooding in. Donated. This story gives me hope for my own OTTB's recovery. My daughter has cerebral palsy and rides therapeutically. Thank you for sharing your journey. Used to watch the Phoenix race. So glad. He's getting a second chance. The most surprising response came from Carlton Investments, Phoenix's former owners, in the form of an official statement and a $5,000 donation to his surgery fund. Their carefully worded press release acknowledged the innovative rehabilitation approach being undertaken and expressed support for the effort, though industry insiders recognized the damage control attempt for what it was. 3 days later, a package arrived from Blue Ridge Equestrian Center. Inside, Caitlin found information on para-equestrian classification, adaptive riding techniques, and a personal note from Diane Holbrook. Focus on healing your horse first. But when you're ready to discuss your own return to riding, call me. Talent doesn't disappear with injury, it adapts. At the bottom was a phone number and a postscript. The Farnsworth saddle comes in custom sizes. Think about it. That night, for the first time since her accident, Caitlin allowed herself to dream of riding again, not competing as she once had, but something new, something different but equally meaningful. As she drifted off to sleep, her mind filled with images of Phoenix moving through water, finding a new way to use his strength, adapting to changed circumstances without surrendering his spirit. Adaptation, she was beginning to understand, was its own form of courage. 3 weeks after Phoenix's first hydrotherapy session, Caitlin sat at the kitchen table surrounded by spreadsheets, fundraising updates, and a half-eaten sandwich. The Phoenix Rising campaign had gained unexpected momentum, with donations now totaling just over $8,000. Impressive progress, but still short of their $12,000 goal for the specialized surgery. You need to eat, not just stare at numbers, Jessica reminded her, sliding the sandwich closer. I had an idea, Caitlin said, ignoring the food. What if we hosted an open house at the farm? People are donating without ever meeting Phoenix. If they could see him in person, hear his story, directly from us. Before Jessica could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Sunrise Meadows, Jessica Parker speaking. Her expression shifted from professional politeness to confusion, then shock. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? Caitlin watched as her aunt scribbled frantically on a notepad, asking occasional clarifying questions before finally hanging up. Who was that? She asked. Jessica looked up, still appearing slightly dazed. Rachel Foster, from Equestrian Today magazine. Apparently they want to do a feature on Phoenix and you. A feature in Equestrian Today? Caitlin's eyes widened. The publication was the most prestigious equestrian magazine in the country, typically featuring Olympic riders and million-dollar show horses, not rescue cases from small rehabilitation farms. She said they've been following the Phoenix Rising website, called it the most compelling equine rehabilitation story of the year. They want to send a reporter and photographer next week. That's... Caitlin searched for words. Incredible! But why now? Why us? Jessica studied her notepad. Apparently, someone significantly vouched for the story. They wouldn't say who. The news of the upcoming magazine feature spread quickly through their small community. Tanya immediately launched into preparations, enlisting volunteers to help spruce up the farm. Marcus devoted extra hours to making the facilities as presentable as possible, while Dr. Walsh scheduled another evaluation to provide updated medical information for the article. The day before the media visit, Mitchell Reynolds arrived unannounced at Sunrise Meadows, finding Caitlin beside Phoenix's paddock filming their daily update for the website. "Heard about the Equestrian Today piece," he said without preamble when she finished recording. "Quite a coup." "We still don't know how it happened," Caitlin admitted, adjusting her chair to face him. Mitchell's expression remained carefully neutral. "You'd be surprised how word travels in this industry. Success speaks for itself." "We're hardly successful yet," Caitlin countered, gesturing toward Phoenix. "The surgery's still weeks away if we can raise the remaining funds." "About that." Mitchell pulled an envelope from his jacket. "Emma and I discussed it, and Blue Ridge would like to make up the difference in your fundraising." Caitlin stared at the check he handed her, the amount precise to cover exactly what they still needed. "Mr. Reynolds, we can't possibly—" "You can and you will," he interrupted firmly. "Consider it an investment in innovation. What you're doing with Phoenix challenges conventional wisdom about rehabilitating difficult cases. That's valuable to all of us who work with performance horses." His generosity left her speechless, but his next statement was even more surprising. "There's something else. Diane Holbrook has been quite insistent about meeting with you again. She's interested in discussing a potential collaboration once Phoenix's surgery is behind you." "Collaboration," Caitlin echoed. "She's developing a para-equestrian training module for our junior riders," Mitchell explained, "looking for someone who understands both the technical aspects of riding and the challenges of adaptation after injury. Your background combined with your current circumstances makes you uniquely qualified." The implications took a moment to sink in. "She wants me to help train riders to start with," Mitchell nodded. "Beyond that would be up to you." He glanced meaningfully at the specialized wheelchair Caitlin used, a high-performance model designed for maximum mobility and independence. "You've clearly adapted to new challenges. Before, this would be another adaptation, not a limitation." After Mitchell left, Caitlin sat motionless beside Phoenix's paddock, his words echoing in her mind. For months after her accident, she had defined herself by what she had lost. Her mobility, her independence, her equestrian dreams. The idea that these very losses might now qualify her for something meaningful hadn't occurred to her. The arrival of the Equestrian Today team the following morning created a flurry of activity at Sunrise Meadows. Charlotte Deering, the magazine's senior writer, proved to be a sharp-eyed professional with 20 years of industry experience and little patience for publicity stunts. Her skepticism was evident as Jessica led her through Phoenix's history and treatment plan. "So you're telling me this horse, who reportedly sent 3 professional handlers to the emergency room, now allows a 16-year-old girl in a wheelchair to work with him without incident?" Charlotte clarified, her pencil poised over her notepad. "See for yourself," Jessica suggested, gesturing toward the paddock where Caitlin was waiting with Phoenix. Charlotte and David Chen, the photographer, observed in silence as Caitlin demonstrated the exercises they had developed. Phoenix, responding to voice commands, moving in patterns around her wheelchair, showing none of the aggression that had made him infamous. "It's a remarkable transformation," Charlotte admitted, though her journalistic detachment remained intact. "But what happens after surgery? What's the end goal? Most rehabilitated racehorses need a new purpose: trail riding, pleasure riding, therapy work. All of those require a rider he accepts. The question hit upon the uncertainty that had lingered unspoken in Caitlin's mind. What was Phoenix's future beyond recovery? What purpose would give meaning to his second chance? We're focusing on one step at a time, she answered carefully. Right now, that means getting him pain-free. Charlotte seemed unsatisfied with the response. These surgeries are expensive and risky. Readers will want to know why it's worth it for a horse that may never be rideable again. Worth is about more than utility, Caitlin replied, her voice gaining conviction. Phoenix has value beyond whether someone can sit on his back. He's teaching us about resilience, about finding new ways forward when the old paths are closed. She met Charlotte's gaze directly. Isn't that worth documenting, regardless of the outcome? Something in Charlotte's expression shifted, professional distance giving way to genuine interest. "Show me more," she said simply. The remainder of the interview delved deeper than expected, into Caitlin's own story, her accident, the parallels she found with Phoenix, and the unexpected community that had formed around their journey. Charlotte asked about the adaptive saddle Caitlin had seen at Blue Ridge, the possibility of para-equestrian training, and the future she now imagined. By late afternoon, when the magazine team finally departed, both Jessica and Caitlin were exhausted from the intensity of the coverage. "Do you think they'll present it fairly?" Caitlin worried, as they watched the car disappear down the driveway. "Charlotte's tough but ethical," Jessica reassured her. "And you were honest. That matters more than anything." That evening, as they sorted through the mail, Caitlin found an official-looking envelope addressed to her personally. Inside was a formal letter from Dr. Abrams, the Kentucky specialist who had pioneered the surgical technique Phoenix needed. "Dr. Abrams can perform the surgery next month," she read aloud to Jessica, her voice rising with excitement. "His schedule had been fully booked, but he's had a cancellation and—" She stopped, rereading a paragraph in disbelief. "What is it?" Jessica prompted. "He's offering a significant discount on his services," Caitlin continued. "Says he's been following Phoenix's case with interest and believes it has educational value for veterinary students. He's asking permission to document the procedure for teaching purposes. With Mitchell's donation and Dr. Abrams' discount, the financial barriers to Phoenix's surgery had suddenly vanished. The path forward, which had seemed so tenuous just days before, was now clear." Later that night, updating the Phoenix Rising website with the news, Caitlin added a personal reflection. "When we started this journey, I thought we were working to fix what was broken. I'm learning now that healing isn't about returning to what was, but discovering what can be. Phoenix will never race again. I will never ride the way I once did, but together we're finding new paths forward, not lesser ones, just different." As she posted the update, her phone chimed with a text from Emma Reynolds. "Diane's asking when you're coming back to Blue Ridge. She doesn't take no for an answer. Fair warning." Caitlin smiled at the message, a sense of possibility washing over her that had nothing to do with Phoenix's upcoming surgery and everything to do with her own emerging future. One she had stopped imagining on the day of her accident, but now seemed to be taking shape before her eyes. Outside in his paddock, Phoenix dozed peacefully under the stars, his injured leg partially lifted to ease the pressure, a temporary accommodation that would soon be unnecessary. Like Caitlin, he stood at the threshold of transformation, the past receding as new possibilities emerged. The University of Kentucky's large animal surgical center stood at the forefront of equine medical innovation, its gleaming facilities a testament to the millions invested in advancing veterinary science. Early morning sunlight glinted off the building's glass facade as Jessica's truck pulled into the visitor parking area, the horse trailer carrying precious cargo. "We made it," she sighed, glancing at Caitlin in the passenger seat. Neither had slept much during their overnight drive from Virginia. 5 hours early, Caitlin noted, checking the time. Phoenix's surgery wasn't scheduled until early afternoon, but they had allowed extra time for any complications during the 6-hour journey. Despite their early arrival, the center was already bustling with activity. Dr. Abrams had arranged for them to use a holding stall where Phoenix could rest before the procedure. A young veterinary resident met them at the entrance, clipboard in hand. "Miss Parker and Miss Parker," she confirmed, checking her notes. "I'm Dr. Rivera, one of Dr. Abrams' residents. We've been reviewing Phoenix's case file this morning." She gestured toward their trailer. "Let's get your patient settled, and then Dr. Abrams would like to meet with you." Phoenix emerged from the trailer with surprising calm, his ears flicking attentively as he took in the unfamiliar surroundings. After weeks of hydrotherapy at Blue Ridge and the medication regimen prescribed by Dr. Walsh, his physical condition had improved markedly. His coat gleamed with health, and though he still favored his injured leg, his overall movement showed greater ease. "He's in excellent pre-surgical condition," Dr. Rivera observed as they led him to the holding area. "That's going to improve his recovery prospects significantly." The holding facility exceeded anything at Sunrise Meadows: padded floors, climate control, and monitoring equipment that rivaled human hospitals. As Phoenix investigated his temporary quarters, Caitlin spoke softly to him, explaining what lay ahead, as if he could understand every word. "Dr. Abrams is going to fix your leg today," she told him, reaching up from her wheelchair to stroke his neck. "It won't hurt any more after you heal." Dr. Craig Abrams proved to be younger than Jessica had expected, in his mid-40s, with prematurely silver hair and the focused energy of someone perpetually running on too much coffee and too little sleep. He greeted them in a conference room adjoining the surgical wing, spreading Phoenix's latest X-rays on a light box. "These are remarkable images," he began without preamble. "Classic case of post-surgical calcification impinging on the neural pathway. The original repair was technically perfect, but this complication occurs in about 8% of similar injuries." He pointed to the small shadow near the joint that had caused Phoenix so much pain. "The fragment is positioned in precisely the worst possible location, brushing against the nerve with every step. Essentially, he's been experiencing a constant electrical shock with any weight-bearing movement." "No wonder he became aggressive," Caitlin murmured. Dr. Abrams nodded. "Horses can't tell us where it hurts. They can only react. Based on these images and your documentation, I'm surprised he's been as tolerant as you describe." He outlined the surgical procedure in detail. A minimally invasive approach using specialized instruments to remove the bone fragment without disturbing the previously healed injury. The technique he had pioneered reduced recovery time significantly compared to traditional open surgery. "I need to be clear about expectations," he cautioned. "While I anticipate a successful removal of the fragment, complete restoration of function isn't guaranteed. There may be permanent nerve damage from the prolonged compression." "Meaning," Jessica prompted. "Meaning he may always have some degree of weakness or discomfort in that leg. He'll certainly be healthier than he is now, but returning to racing form is unlikely." "We never expected him to race again," Caitlin assured him. "We just want him to be comfortable." Dr. Abrams studied her thoughtfully. "Your video updates have been quite informative. The hydrotherapy approach is particularly interesting. Not standard protocol for this type of injury, but clearly effective in your case." As their meeting concluded, Dr. Abrams explained that veterinary students would observe the surgery as part of their education, with the procedure recorded for future teaching purposes. "Your Phoenix is becoming something of a case study in innovative rehabilitation approaches," he noted. Back in the holding area, the pre-surgical preparations began. Phoenix would require general anesthesia, always a risk with horses, whose size and physiology made the process of safely putting them under and waking them up again particularly challenging. As the technicians prepared the initial sedatives, Caitlin sat with Phoenix, her presence keeping him calm amid the unfamiliar activity. "I can't stay with you during the surgery," she explained, her voice steady despite her anxiety, "but I'll be waiting when you wake up." The moment of separation came too quickly. As the sedative began taking effect, Phoenix's massive head drooped. Lower, his eyelids growing heavy, Caitlin stroked his muzzle one last time before the surgical team took over, efficiently attaching monitoring equipment as they prepared to move him to the operating theater. "He's in good hands," Dr. Rivera assured Caitlin as they wheeled Phoenix away. "Dr. Abrams is the best there is for this procedure." The waiting room overlooked a courtyard garden designed for precisely this purpose, giving anxious owners a peaceful space during the long hours of surgery. Jessica paced, while Caitlin positioned her wheelchair beside the window, her gaze fixed on a red maple tree whose leaves fluttered in the autumn breeze. "What if something goes wrong?" She finally voiced the fear that had been building since they'd first scheduled the surgery. Jessica paused her pacing. "Dr. Abrams does this procedure regularly with excellent results. Phoenix is strong and relatively young. The odds are in his favor." "But there are always risks," Caitlin persisted. "The anesthesia alone—" "Yes, there are risks," Jessica acknowledged. "Just like there were risks in bringing him home in the first place. Just like there are risks in everything worth doing." The surgery took just over 2 hours, faster than anticipated. Dr. Abrams himself came to update them, still wearing his surgical cap. "We've successfully removed the bone fragment," he reported, his professional demeanor softening with genuine satisfaction. "Clean extraction with minimal disturbance to the surrounding tissue. He's in recovery now." "And the nerve," Caitlin pressed. "Visually, it appears less damaged than I feared. There's some inflammation, which we expected, but the nerve structure itself seems intact. That's promising for functional recovery. The most dangerous period for horses after surgery is waking from anesthesia. Their size and instinct to stand immediately can lead to injuries or tearing of surgical repairs. Phoenix would be carefully monitored in a padded recovery stall, supported by a specialized sling system until he regained full awareness. It will be a few hours before he's fully conscious," Dr. Abrams explained. "I suggest you both get some rest. There's a hotel across the street where most of our clients stay." Jessica made arrangements for a room, but Caitlin refused to leave the center. "I promised I'd be here when he wakes up," she insisted. "He'll be disoriented and afraid." Dr. Rivera, taking pity on Caitlin's determination, arranged for her to observe the recovery stall through a monitoring window, safely out of the way but able to see Phoenix as he gradually emerged from anesthesia. To whom? Process was slow and tense. As the anesthesia wore off, Phoenix began to show signs of distress. His breathing quickened, legs twitching involuntarily. The recovery team worked with practiced efficiency, adjusting the support sling and speaking in calm, reassuring tones. "This is normal," Dr. Rivera assured Caitlin, who watched with white-knuckled tension. "The transition from unconsciousness is always difficult. The sling prevents him from trying to stand before he's ready." When Phoenix's eyes finally opened, unfocused and panicked, Caitlin couldn't contain herself any longer. "Can he hear me from here?" Dr. Rivera hesitated, then nodded toward an intercom system. "You can speak through this. Sometimes a voice helps with orientation." Caitlin didn't hesitate. "Phoenix, it's me," she said, her voice steady despite her anxiety. "You're okay. The surgery is over. Your leg is going to feel better now." The effect was immediate and startling. Phoenix's thrashing calmed, his ears swiveling toward the sound of her voice. His eyes, still glazed from the drugs, searched the room until they found the window where she sat. "That's remarkable," Dr. Rivera murmured. "Keep talking to him." For the next hour, Caitlin maintained a gentle monologue, discussing everything from the weather to plans for his recovery paddock. Back home, Phoenix listened, his breathing gradually steadying, his transition to consciousness proceeding with none of the dangerous thrashing that often complicated equine recovery. By evening, Phoenix was standing on his own, the support sling removed. Though groggy and unsteady, he appeared comfortable, the surgical site neatly bandaged. Dr. Abrams, returning for a final check before heading home, seemed pleasantly surprised by the smooth recovery. "He's doing exceptionally well," he told Jessica. "And Caitlin, if this continues, you should be able to transport him home in 3 days, rather than the 5 we initially discussed." That night, after finally convincing Caitlin to get some rest at the hotel, Dr. Abrams made a personal call to Mitchell Reynolds. "The Parker case went perfectly," he reported. "Your instincts were right, both about the horse's condition and the girl's commitment." "I'm not often wrong about potential," Mitchell replied. "Will he recover to full function?" "Too soon to tell definitively, but early signs are promising. With proper post-operative care and continued rehabilitation, he should regain near normal function, comfortable movement, pain-free existence. And the surgical approach, was it educational?" "Thoroughly. The students were fascinated, particularly by the case history. It's not often we get to demonstrate how behavioral issues tie directly to pain pathology." After hanging up, Dr. Abrams made one final note in Phoenix's file. "Patient shows extraordinary response to owner's voice. Recommended post-operative care should include maximum contact with primary handler, C. Parker, to ensure optimal psychological recovery alongside physical rehabilitation." The journey back to Sunrise Meadows felt markedly different from their tense drive to Kentucky 3 days earlier. Phoenix traveled quietly in the trailer, the post-surgical medication keeping him comfortable despite the movement. In the truck, Caitlin reviewed Dr. Abrams's detailed recovery instructions, while Jessica focused on the road ahead. 8 weeks of strictly controlled rehabilitation, Caitlin read aloud. First 2 weeks limited to hand-walking only, 5 minutes. 3 times daily, gradually increasing to 15 minutes by week 3. "Sounds like we'll need to adjust the paddock setup," Jessica noted. "That small enclosure near the main barn would work. Just enough space for controlled movement without allowing him to run." The rehabilitation protocol was exacting. Precise medication schedules, specific exercises, regular veterinary checkups, and strict limitations on Phoenix's activity. Dr. Abrams had emphasized that the success of the surgery now depended entirely on their disciplined adherence to the recovery plan. Dr. Abrams also recommends continuing hydrotherapy once the surgical site has fully healed, Caitlin continued. "Says it will be crucial for rebuilding muscle without stressing the joint." "Mitchell already said we could continue using the pool at Blue Ridge," Jessica reminded her. Caitlin nodded, her mind clearly elsewhere. After a moment she asked, "Do you think he'll ever be rideable?" The question hung between them, the unspoken consideration that had shadowed their entire journey with Phoenix. Jessica chose her words carefully. Dr. Abrams seemed optimistic about his physical recovery, but temperament is another matter entirely. Even before his injury, he was a high-strung racehorse, not a quiet trail mount. "I know," Caitlin said. "I just keep thinking about what Emma said about adapted riding equipment, about how horses don't care, how you cue them as long as the communication is clear." Jessica glanced at her niece, noting the thoughtful determination in her expression. "Are you thinking about riding again? Specifically, riding Phoenix?" "I don't know," Caitlin admitted. "Maybe it's crazy, but I keep thinking about how we both had to adapt to unexpected limitations, how we both had to find new ways forward." She looked out the window, watching the landscape rush by. What if we could figure it out together? Their return to Sunrise Meadows sparked a flurry of activity. Marcus had prepared the small rehabilitation paddock according to Jessica's phone instructions, creating the perfect controlled environment for Phoenix's recovery. Dr. Walsh waited to examine Phoenix immediately upon arrival, eager to see Dr. Abrams' work firsthand. Textbook incision, she noted approvingly, inspecting the surgical site. Minimal swelling, good color. He couldn't have had better care. The first days of rehabilitation established a new rhythm to farm life. Phoenix's medication and walking schedule became the fixed points around which everything else revolved. Caitlin took primary responsibility for his care, meticulously tracking every detail of his recovery in a journal that grew more comprehensive by the day. 1 week post-surgery, the Phoenix Rising website posted its most popular update yet, a video of Phoenix taking his first comfortable steps without the visible limp that had plagued him since his racing injury. Comments and donations continued to flow in, many from people following their journey from the beginning. The Equestrian Today article hits newsstands next week, Jessica mentioned, as they completed Phoenix's evening medication routine. Charlotte sent an advance copy. They're featuring you two on the cover. The cover? Caitlin looked up in surprise. I thought we'd be a small article in the back. Jessica smiled. Apparently your story resonated more than anyone expected. The magazine's arrival created another wave of attention. The cover photo captured Caitlin and Phoenix in a moment of quiet connection, her wheelchair positioned beside him, her hand resting on his neck, both gazing forward with matching expressions of dignified determination. The headline read simply, "Redefining Recovery, the remarkable journey of a discarded champion and the girl who understood his pain." Charlotte's article proved to be a masterpiece of equestrian journalism, balancing technical details of Phoenix's medical treatment with the emotional core of their story. She had interwoven Caitlin's own recovery journey without sentimentality, presenting their parallel paths with respect and nuance. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Interview requests flooded in from equestrian blogs, local newspapers, and even a national morning show. The Phoenix Rising fundraising page, now focused on supporting rehabilitation costs and eventually expanding the program to other abandoned racehorses, saw donations triple overnight. Amid this whirlwind of public attention, a more private development was taking shape. 2 weeks after Phoenix's surgery, Diane Holbrook from Blue Ridge called Caitlin directly. "I've been following your progress," she said without preamble when Caitlin answered. "Both yours and the horses. I'm impressed with your rehabilitation and protocol. Very thorough. Thank you," Caitlin replied, unsure where the conversation was heading. "Mitchell tells me Phoenix will need ongoing hydrotherapy. You'll be back at Blue Ridge regularly." It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. "While you're here, I'd like you to observe our para-equestrian training sessions." Caitlin hesitated. "Just observe. For now." A pause. "I've been reviewing your old competition videos. You had excellent fundamentals, solid seat position, good hands. Those qualities don't disappear with paralysis. They adapt." The directness was both intimidating and refreshing. "I haven't been on a horse since my accident," Caitlin admitted. "I'm aware," Diane replied. "That's going to change. Tuesday at 10 a.m. after Phoenix's hydrotherapy. Don't be late." The call ended before Caitlin could respond, leaving her stunned but inexplicably energized by the woman's confidence, as if returning to riding was simply a matter of scheduling rather than a monumental psychological and physical hurdle. When Tuesday arrived, Caitlin found herself in Blue Ridge's state-of-the-art indoor arena, watching as 2 riders with various physical disabilities worked their horses through complex dressage patterns. Emma joined her, explaining the specialized equipment and techniques each rider employed. "Lisa has cerebral palsy," she explained, nodding toward a woman executing a flawless shoulder-in on a compact chestnut gelding. "She uses voice commands combined with modified reins that attach to a chest harness. Mark, she indicated the other. Rider, a young man with a prosthetic leg, uses a specially designed saddle with additional support on his affected side. Diane Holbrook approached as the lesson concluded, her assessing gaze taking in Caitlin's reactions. Questions? Dozens, Caitlin admitted, but mainly how did they start after their disabilities, I mean. That first time back on a horse, differently for each, Diane answered simply. There's no universal template for adaptation, only principles. You work with what you have, compensate for what you don't, and focus on communication rather than traditional technique. She gestured toward an adjoining arena where a bay quarter horse stood patiently beside a mounting ramp. That's Diplomat, 20 years old, former reigning champion, now our introduction horse for new para riders. Completely bomb-proof and responsive to the lightest aids. Caitlin's heart raced as she understood the implication. You want me to ride today? I don't have any equipment, any preparation. Equipment is waiting in the tack room. As for preparation, Diane raised an eyebrow. You've been preparing since you first sat on a horse as a child. This is simply the next chapter. Emma squeezed Caitlin's shoulder encouragingly. I'll help you transfer to the mounting ramp. Diplomat does all the hard work after that. For a breathless moment, Caitlin teetered on the edge of refusal. The prospect of trying and failing, of confronting her limitations so publicly, sent waves of anxiety through her body. Then she thought of Phoenix, how he had stepped into the hydrotherapy pool, despite his fear, trusting her guidance. Okay, she said finally. Show me how. The adapted saddle felt foreign under her hands, wider, with additional support structures and specialized security features. Emma and a groom helped position her, explaining each adjustment as they secured her legs and provided the modified reins. The saddle holds your lower body in position, Emma explained. You'll use your core and upper body strength for balance and communication. Your hands and voice become your primary aids. When Diplomat was led beneath her and the transfer completed, Caitlin found herself on horseback for the first time in 14 months. The sensation was simultaneously familiar and entirely new. The warmth of the horse beneath her, the elevated perspective, the gentle movement as Diplomat shifted his weight. Tears sprang to her eyes unbidden, not from pain or fear, but from the overwhelming rightness of the moment. All the months of grief for what she had lost seemed to lift briefly, replaced by the sudden realization of what remained possible. Breathe, Diane instructed firmly. This is just the beginning. Today we walk only, and only on the lead line. There will be time for more, later. As Diplomat was led slowly around the arena, Caitlin focused on relearning her balance from this new perspective. Without leg control, she needed to rely entirely on her core strength and the specialized supports of the adaptive saddle. The familiar rhythm of the horse's movement beneath her awakened muscle memories she had feared lost forever. Good, Diane noted, watching her adjustments with professional scrutiny. Your upper body instincts are still excellent. We can work with that. The session lasted only 15 minutes, brief by any standard. But as Caitlin was helped back into her wheelchair, she felt a seismic shift in her perception of her future. What had seemed permanently closed to her now appeared as a door just beginning to open. Same time next week, Diane stated rather than asked. In the meantime, core strengthening exercises. Emma will show you what you need. Back at Sunrise Meadows that evening, as Caitlin completed Phoenix's daily walker therapy, she found herself studying his movement with new eyes, not just monitoring his surgical recovery, but considering his potential as a partner. His natural balance, the smoothness of his gait despite his injury, the intelligence in his responses, qualities that might someday translate to more than just groundwork. We've both got a long way to go, she told him, adjusting his therapeutic leg wraps. But we took important first steps today. Phoenix nickered softly, his ears focused on her with the attentiveness that had characterized their bond from the beginning. The connection between two beings finding their way toward new possibilities neither could have imagined alone. 6 weeks after surgery, Phoenix stood calmly in the Blue Ridge hydrotherapy pool, the water supporting his weight as he moved with increasing confidence through the guided exercises. His surgical site had healed cleanly, the scar already beginning to fade beneath his growing coat. More importantly, the pain that had driven his aggressive behavior had visibly subsided, replaced by a quiet alertness that Dr. Walsh described as the re-emergence of his true personality. On the pool deck, Caitlin conferred with Tyler, the physical therapist, reviewing the latest measurements of Phoenix's muscle development and range of motion. "The improvement in his stride symmetry is remarkable," Tyler noted, showing her the comparison videos taken weekly since surgery. "When he first came, he was compensating heavily with his right side. Now he's nearly balanced." "Dr. Abrams will be pleased," Caitlin replied, unable to hide her pride in Phoenix's progress. His 4-week assessment predicted it would take 3 months to reach this level of improvement. Phoenix's recovery had outpaced even the most optimistic projections, a fact Dr. Abrams attributed to the comprehensive rehabilitation program and the horse's evident motivation. "I've rarely seen a post-surgical patient try so hard," he had commented during his follow-up call the previous week. As Phoenix completed his therapy session, Emma appeared, dressed in riding clothes and carrying a helmet. "Ready for your lesson?" she asked Caitlin. "Diane's waiting in the indoor arena." The parallel training schedule had become their new routine. Phoenix's hydrotherapy followed immediately by Caitlin's para-equestrian session. Though still riding only the steady diplomat, Caitlin had progressed from being led at a walk to independently controlling the horse at both walk and trot, using a combination of voice commands, rein aids, and core balance. Today, however, Diane had something different planned. "We're adding a new element," she announced as Caitlin entered the arena. "You've mastered basic control. Now we work on deeper communication." A series of ground poles had been arranged in a pattern across the arena floor, creating a simple obstacle course. Beside them stood another instructor Caitlin hadn't met, a compact woman with close-cropped grey hair and the weathered complexion of someone who lived outdoors. "This is Sergeant Maria Vasquez," Diane introduced, "retired Marine, Paralympic equestrian, and specialist in adaptive riding techniques." Maria nodded briskly. "Diane tells me you're making good progress. Today, we're going to work on proprioception, your awareness of your body in space without visual cues." Once mounted on Diplomat, Caitlin was surprised when Maria handed her a blindfold. "Put this on," she instructed. "You want me to ride blindfolded?" Caitlin asked incredulously. "I want you to feel the horse's movement without relying on sight," Maria clarified. "When you can't use your legs for balance cues, your other senses need to compensate." The exercise proved both terrifying and revelatory. Without visual reference, Caitlin was forced to focus entirely on the subtle shifts in Diplomat's body beneath her, anticipating his movements rather than reacting to them. Maria walked alongside, offering occasional guidance, but mostly allowing Caitlin to find her own way through the sensory experience. "Your upper body instincts are excellent," Maria observed after several circuits of the arena. "You naturally adjust your weight in response to the horse's movement. That's something that can't be taught. You either have it or you don't." When the blindfold came off, Diane was watching with uncharacteristic approval. "Good foundation. We can build on this." She checked her watch. "Phoenix should be finished with his cool-down by now. Go see him, then come back tomorrow at the same time." As Caitlin wheeled herself back to the hydrotherapy center, her mind buzzed with the implications of this new training direction. Each para-equestrian session expanded her conception of what might be possible, not just for herself, but eventually perhaps for Phoenix as well. Back at Sunrise Meadows, these parallel journeys of recovery had begun to attract attention beyond the equestrian community. The local news station had run a feature on their story, followed by a segment on a regional broadcast. The Phoenix Rising website now had followers from across the country and beyond, many drawn by the universal themes of overcoming adversity and finding new purpose after life-altering setbacks. Most unexpected was the impact on Sunrise Meadows itself. Donations had increased substantially, allowing Jessica to take on 2 additional rescue cases and hire a part-time assistant. Volunteers appeared regularly, inspired by Phoenix's story, and eager to contribute to similar rehabilitation efforts. "We've had 3 inquiries about internships this week alone," Jessica told Caitlin as they reviewed the farm's monthly accounts. "And the county's vocational rehabilitation program wants to discuss a possible partnership." "What kind of partnership?" Caitlin asked, looking up from her laptop where she'd been updating Phoenix's progress journal. "They work with disabled clients, seeking job training and independent living skills," Jessica explained. "They're interested in developing an equine therapy component, possibly here at Sunrise Meadows. The potential expansion of the farm's mission, from simple horse rehabilitation to a program that might help people with disabilities find new paths forward, resonated deeply with Caitlin's evolving vision for her own future. "That sounds amazing," she said thoughtfully. "I've been reading research on therapeutic riding programs. The benefits for participants are incredible: physical strengthening, emotional regulation, confidence building." Jessica studied her niece with thoughtful eyes. "You know, I've been watching you these past few months. The way you've approached Phoenix's rehabilitation, your own return to riding, the educational content you've created for the website. You've found your calling, haven't you?" The question caught Caitlin by surprise, not because it was wrong, but because she hadn't quite articulated it to herself yet. "I think maybe I have," she acknowledged. "Before the accident, I just wanted to compete, to win ribbons and advance through the levels. Now I see so many other possibilities in working with horses." That evening, as they completed Phoenix's expanded exercise routine, now including gentle ground pole work, similar to what Caitlin had done blindfolded, Marcus approached with an unexpected visitor, Charlotte Deering from Equestrian Today. "Sorry to drop in unannounced," Charlotte greeted them. "I was in the area for another story and couldn't resist checking on your progress." Her presence was no coincidence, as they soon discovered. The response to their feature article had been unprecedented in the magazine's history, generating more reader mail and online engagement than any story in the past decade. "We're planning a follow-up," Charlotte explained as they showed her Phoenix's dramatically improved condition. "Not just about his physical recovery, but about the educational impact your journey has had. You've sparked conversations throughout the industry about rehabilitation approaches, second career options for racehorses, and adaptive riding opportunities." Charlotte's professional demeanor softened as she watched Caitlin work with Phoenix, guiding him through simple obstacles with voice commands and subtle body language. "There's something special happening here, something beyond a good human interest story." Later, after Charlotte had departed with promises to return for a more formal follow-up, Jessica found Caitlin in Phoenix's stall, methodically checking his legs for any signs of stress from the day's activities. "Charlotte left something for you," she said, handing over a business card. "From the executive director of the American Therapeutic Riding Association. Apparently they're holding their annual conference in Washington next month and would like you to speak about your experience." Caitlin stared at the card, momentarily speechless. "Me? Speak at a national conference?" "About innovative approaches to equine human healing partnerships," Jessica quoted with a smile. Charlotte recommended, "You said no one else could speak so authentically to both sides of the equation. The invitation represented more than professional recognition. It was acknowledgement that Caitlin's unique perspective had value precisely because of her experience, not despite it. The accident that had seemed to end her equestrian dreams had, instead, opened doors to a different, perhaps more meaningful path within that world. That night, updating the Phoenix Rising website with their latest progress, Caitlin added a personal reflection. 8 months ago, I believed everything I loved about my life was over. Today I realized those dreams weren't ended, they were redirected. Sometimes the path we're given isn't the one we would have chosen, but it leads to places we never could have discovered otherwise. As she typed, Phoenix stood contentedly in his stall, occasionally nickering softly as if in agreement. His physical transformation was remarkable. The once skeletal frame now healthy and strong, the dull coat now gleaming, the fearful aggression replaced by alert intelligence. Yet the most profound change was invisible to casual observers. The trust that had developed between horse and human, each finding in the other a mirror for their own journey toward wholeness. Outside the stable, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, a reminder of how much had changed since that October day at the auction, when a desperate horse and a grieving girl had first recognized something in each other worth saving. Winter wrapped Sunrise Meadows in a blanket of white, transforming the landscape into a hushed, crystalline wonderland. 3 months after his surgery, Phoenix had graduated from basic rehabilitation to more advanced conditioning exercises. The bone fragment that had caused him such pain was gone, and the damaged nerve was showing significant signs of regeneration. His recovery exceeds our most optimistic projections, Dr. Walsh confirmed during her monthly evaluation. Physically, he's sound enough for light work. The question now is whether his behavioral rehabilitation has kept pace with his physical healing. The question hung unspoken between them. Would Phoenix, despite his physical improvement, ever accept a rider again, or had his psychological scars left him permanently unsuitable for anything beyond groundwork? Caitlin had been carefully avoiding this question, focusing instead on what she knew was possible: the daily care, the groundwork exercises, the growing trust between them. But as Phoenix's physical rehabilitation progressed, the moment of decision approached inexorably. One snowy morning in January, Diane Holbrook arrived unexpectedly at Sunrise Meadows, her truck navigating the icy driveway with stubborn determination. She found Caitlin in the indoor arena Jessica had finally managed to enclose, a modest space compared to Blue Ridge's facilities, but functional for basic training during inclement weather. "Your para-equestrian skills are progressing well," Diane stated without preamble, watching as Caitlin guided Phoenix through a series of ground poles, using only voice commands and subtle body language from her wheelchair. "But you're approaching a crossroads." "What do you mean?" Caitlin asked, though she suspected she already knew. "You've mastered the basics on Diplomat, a horse specifically trained for adaptive riders. You've developed the necessary body awareness and communication skills." Diane gestured toward Phoenix. "Meanwhile, he's physically recovered enough for light work under the saddle. The next logical step is to determine if you two can work together in that capacity." The directness was characteristic of Diane, but the implication sent a jolt of both excitement and fear through Caitlin. "You think I should try to ride Phoenix?" "I think it's time to find out if that's even possible," Diane clarified. "He may never accept a rider again, regardless of who it is. But if anyone has a chance, it's you." The prospect was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Though Phoenix had made remarkable progress, his history of rejecting, even injuring previous riders couldn't be ignored. And while Caitlin had regained confidence in her adapted riding abilities, Phoenix presented a completely different challenge from the steady, predictable Diplomat. What if he panics? I can't exactly bail out if things go wrong, Caitlin pointed, out gesturing to her wheelchair, which is precisely why we'll approach this systematically with every possible safety measure in place, Diane replied. She outlined her proposed plan, a careful, gradual process, beginning with desensitization to the adapted saddle and eventually progressing to supported mounting exercises with extensive precautions. We won't rush this, she assured Caitlin. It could take weeks just to acclimate him to the equipment. The goal isn't to force a partnership that may not be possible, but to discover what is possible between you. That evening, Caitlin shared Diane's proposal with Jessica, whose immediate reaction was protective concern. It's too risky, Jessica insisted. Phoenix has come so far, but we have to be realistic about his history. And you... She faltered, the fear evident in her eyes. I can't bear the thought of you getting hurt again. I understand, Caitlin replied quietly. But I need to try, Aunt Jess. Not because I'm desperate to ride again, but because I think it might be what Phoenix needs. 2. To complete his healing by learning to trust completely. The debate extended into the following days, with Marcus and Dr. Walsh weighing in with their professional assessments. Dr. Walsh, while acknowledging the physical recovery that made riding theoretically possible, emphasized the unpredictable nature of Phoenix's psychological healing. Marcus, surprisingly, supported the attempt. I've watched them together for months, he told Jessica. That horse understands her in a way I've never seen before. If anyone can cross that final boundary with him, it's Caitlin, Emma Reynolds, and her father offered Blue Ridge's facilities for the attempt, where emergency support and specialized equipment would be readily available. Mitchell suggested involving Dr. Abrams in the planning process, given his intimate knowledge of Phoenix's condition. This isn't just about whether Phoenix can be ridden, Dr. Abrams noted during their conference call. It's about whether the human-animal bond can overcome trauma and create new patterns of trust. From a research perspective, it's fascinating. From a practical perspective, proceed with extreme caution. After a week of deliberation, a comprehensive safety plan was established. Preparation would begin at Sunrise Meadows, with basic desensitization to the adapted equipment, supervised by Diane. If Phoenix accepted these initial steps, they would progress to more advanced exercises at Blue Ridge, under the watchful eyes of their entire support team. The first phase, introducing Phoenix to the specialized saddle, went more smoothly than anyone had anticipated. Perhaps because of his extensive groundwork training with Caitlin, or perhaps because the adapted saddle looked and smelled significantly different from the racing tack that might have triggered negative associations, Phoenix accepted the new equipment with cautious curiosity rather than fear. He's investigating it rather than reacting to it, Diane observed, as Phoenix sniffed and lipped at the saddle Caitlin held up for his inspection. That's promising. Over the next 2 weeks, they progressed through carefully planned stages, placing the saddle on his back for brief periods, gradually increasing the time he wore it, adding the specialized girth and stabilizing features. Throughout the process, Caitlin remained constant, her voice, her touch, her unwavering patience establishing the foundation for each new challenge. By early February, they were ready for the next critical phase, simulating the weight and pressure of a rider while Phoenix remained firmly on the ground. Using a specialized mounting dummy weighted to approximate Caitlin's upper body, they gradually accustomed Phoenix to the sensation of weight in the saddle. His initial reaction, a startled flinch and sideways dancing, gave way to tolerance and eventually to indifference as he learned this new pressure meant him no harm. Caitlin worked alongside him throughout, providing reassurance and immediate rewards for calm acceptance. He's processing rather than reacting, Maria Vasquez noted during one session. That's the difference between a traumatized response and a thinking response. He's making conscious choices now. The final preparatory stage before an actual mounting attempt involved positioning Caitlin above Phoenix using a mechanical lift, allowing him to feel her presence directly above and beside him without the pressure of her weight. These sessions, conducted with Phoenix secured in cross ties and surrounded by experienced handlers, tested his willingness to accept Caitlin in a new physical relationship. Talk to him constantly, Diane instructed during the first attempt. Let him track your voice as your position changes. Suspended in the lift harness, Caitlin maintained a steady stream of reassurance as she was gradually positioned above Phoenix's back. The stallion's ears swiveled continuously to follow her voice, his body tense but controlled as she hovered just above the saddle. Good boy, Phoenix. I'm still me, just in a different place. You're doing so well. After 3 successful sessions with the lift, Diane finally declared them ready for the ultimate test. The date was set for Valentine's Day, a symmetry that didn't escape Caitlin's notice. A fitting day to find out if this relationship can reach the next level, she noted in her journal. The evening before the attempt, Caitlin spent extra time with Phoenix, not training, but simply being together in the quiet stable. As snow fell gently outside, she talked to him about their journey, from that desperate day at the auction to this moment of possibility neither could have imagined then. Whatever happens tomorrow, she told him, resting her forehead against his, you've already done more than anyone thought possible. You've shown everyone that second chances aren't just sentimental stories, they're real possibilities when someone believes in you. Phoenix's soft nickering seemed like an answer, his breath warm against her face in the chilly air, 2 beings poised at the threshold of either a remarkable breakthrough or the acceptance of unchangeable limitations. Either way, Caitlin realized, they would face it together, each made stronger by the other's presence in their life. The journey that had begun with a rescue had transformed into something far more profound, a partnership of equals, each healing the other in ways neither medicine nor traditional therapy could accomplish alone. Valentine's Day dawned bright and cold, sunlight glittering off fresh snow as Jessica's truck pulled into Blue Ridge Equestrian Center. The facility had been specially prepared for the momentous attempt. The indoor arena cleared of all other activities, specialized safety equipment positioned strategically, and a team of experts assembled to support what everyone recognized as a watershed moment in Phoenix's rehabilitation. Nervous, Jessica asked, glancing at Caitlin in the passenger seat. Terrified, Caitlin admitted, but ready. Inside, the atmosphere was one of focused anticipation. Mitchell Reynolds had arranged for Dr. Abrams to fly in from Kentucky to observe and advise. Emma and Maria Vasquez were already warming up Phoenix with familiar groundwork exercises, while Diane Holbrook inspected the specially modified mounting ramp and adaptive equipment. The key today is patience, Dr. Abrams reminded everyone during their final briefing. This isn't about success or failure. It's about giving Phoenix the opportunity to make his own choice without pressure or fear. Caitlin nodded, understanding completely. Throughout their journey, Phoenix's healing had progressed at its own pace, each breakthrough coming when the horse was ready, not when humans demanded it. Today would be no different. The attempt would follow the carefully structured plan they had rehearsed for weeks. First, Phoenix would be brought to the mounting area and secured with safety lines held by experienced handlers, not to restrain him, but to prevent any sudden movements from endangering Caitlin. Then, using the mechanical lift they had practiced, Caitlin would be positioned above the saddle, pausing there to give Phoenix time to adjust before any weight was transferred. We can stop at any point, Diane emphasized. If he shows any signs of significant stress, we reassess. As final preparations were completed, Caitlin asked for a moment alone with Phoenix. The others withdrew to a respectful distance, giving them space in the center of the arena. Hey, big guy, she said softly, wheeling herself to where Phoenix stood, already saddled with the specialized adaptive equipment. Today's a big day, but nothing changes between us, no matter what happens. Phoenix lowered his head to her level, blowing softly against her hair in the familiar gesture that had become his signature greeting. Caitlin stroked his face, noticing how his eyes remained calm and clear despite the unusual activity around them. "Ready when you are," she told Diane after these private moments. The process began with methodical precision. Phoenix was positioned beside the mounting platform, with Marcus and 2 Blue Ridge staff members holding the safety lines. Emma stood at his head, a calming presence he had grown to trust during his rehabilitation sessions. Caitlin transferred from her wheelchair to the platform, where the mechanical lift was anchored. The specialized harness, similar to those used in therapeutic swimming programs, supported her body securely while allowing precise control of her positioning. "We'll go slowly," Diane directed from her position controlling the lift. Constant verbal communication with Phoenix. As the lift began to raise her, Caitlin maintained a steady stream of reassuring words. "Easy, Phoenix. It's just me, same as always. You're doing great." Phoenix's ears flicked continuously toward her voice, tracking her movement. His body tensed slightly as she rose above him, but he remained standing squarely, neither shying away nor showing signs of panic. "Perfect," Maria commented. "His attention is completely on you, not on his own anxiety." When Caitlin was positioned directly above the saddle, Diane paused the lift. This was the moment they had reached in practice. Caitlin suspended above Phoenix, present but not yet making contact. Now came the critical difference, gradually lowering her weight onto his back. "Ready?" Diane asked. Caitlin took a deep breath. "Ready?" The descent began with exquisite slowness, millimeter by millimeter. Caitlin continued talking to Phoenix, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Everyone in the arena seemed to hold their breath as the gap between rider and horse narrowed. The first touch was barely perceptible, just the lightest contact between the adaptive saddle and Phoenix's back. The stallion's muscles quivered beneath. The strange new pressure, his head lifting slightly, but he didn't move his feet. "Good," Diane encouraged. "We'll hold here until he settles." 2 minutes stretched into 5 as they waited for Phoenix to process this new sensation. Gradually, his initial tension eased. His head lowered to a more natural position, and his breathing steadied, moving to next phase, Diane announced softly. More weight transferred now, Caitlin gradually settling into the saddle while the lift continued to provide support. Phoenix shifted his stance to accommodate the changing pressure, but remained remarkably calm. "He's adjusting, not resisting," Dr. Abrams noted with professional interest. "Look at his expression. He's thinking, not reacting from fear." When Caitlin's full upper body weight finally rested in the saddle, a collective release of tension swept through the arena. Phoenix stood steady beneath her, his ears still focused on her voice, his body alert but not afraid. "Disconnect the lift but maintain the safety harness," Diane instructed. With the lift mechanism detached, Caitlin sat fully on Phoenix's back. For the first time, supported by the adaptive saddle's specialized design. The safety lines remained in place, held loosely enough to allow natural movement while providing immediate security if needed. "How does he feel?" Emma asked from her position at Phoenix's head. "Solid," Caitlin replied, wonder evident in her voice. "Completely solid." The next test was movement, the most challenging aspect for both horse and rider. Would Phoenix accept not just the static weight, but the shifting balance and pressure of a rider in motion? "One step at a time," Diane directed Emma. "Forward first, on your cue." Emma gently encouraged Phoenix to take a single step forward. The horse hesitated, processing this new request while carrying weight. Caitlin maintained her balance, using her upper body strength and the saddle's supportive features, keeping her voice calm and encouraging. "It's okay, Phoenix, just like our groundwork, but I'm up here now." After what seemed an eternity, Phoenix took a deliberate step forward, then another. His movement was cautious but steady, adjusting to Caitlin's weight with each stride. "Release the head," Diane instructed Emma after several successful steps. "Let's see if he'll respond to Caitlin's cues alone." Emma stepped away, leaving Phoenix guided only by Caitlin's hands and voice. The arena fell silent as everyone watched the horse make his choice, to accept this new relationship or reject it, as he had with every rider since his injury. "Walk on, Phoenix," Caitlin said softly, applying gentle pressure with the adapted reins. Phoenix stood motionless for several heartbeats, as if weighing his options. Then, with deliberate purpose, he stepped forward, responding to Caitlin's cue without hesitation or fear. A spontaneous cheer erupted from the observers, quickly hushed by Diane's sharp gesture. "Don't break their concentration," she warned. For the next 10 minutes, Caitlin guided Phoenix in slow circles and gentle curves around the arena, using the communication techniques she'd practiced during her para-equestrian training. The stallion responded with increasing confidence, his natural athletic grace beginning to emerge as he adjusted to carrying a rider again. "Enough for today," Diane finally called. "Always end on success." As they returned to the mounting platform, and the reverse process began, Caitlin carefully lifted from Phoenix's back. The professional reserve of the assembled experts gave way to genuine emotion. Dr. Abrams shook his head in amazement, while Mitchell Reynolds discreetly wiped moisture from his eyes. "In 30 years of equine rehabilitation, I've never seen anything quite like this," Dr. Abrams admitted. "A horse with his history, accepting a rider for the first time since his trauma. It defies conventional wisdom." "Nothing about these two has ever been conventional," Jessica replied, watching as Caitlin transferred back to her wheelchair, her face radiant with joy despite the physical exertion. Phoenix received lavish praise and treats, his demeanor calm and satisfied, as if he understood the significance of what he had accomplished. When Emma led him to the cool-down area, he walked with the relaxed confidence of an athlete who has remembered his purpose. "What happens now?" Maria asked Diane as they gathered to debrief. Diane's normally stern expression had softened into something approaching wonder. "Now we build on this foundation, gradually increase duration, complexity of movement, independence of control. But the fundamental question has been answered. He will accept her as his rider." For Caitlin, surrounded by congratulations and technical discussions of next steps, the experience transcended all professional analysis. For those brief minutes on Phoenix's back, she had reclaimed a part of herself she had feared lost forever, not identical to what had been, but authentic and meaningful in its new form. Later, as Phoenix rested in his stall at Blue Ridge, Mitchell having insisted they stay overnight rather than trailer home after such an eventful day, Caitlin sat beside him, phone in hand, as she recorded their daily update for the Phoenix Rising website. "Today, Phoenix made a choice that no one could make for him," she said, her voice still carrying traces of awe. "He chose trust over fear, connection over isolation, possibility over limitation. In doing so, he's reminded me that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about creating something new from what remains." Outside the stall, Jessica watched silently, recognizing in her niece's quiet joy something that had been missing since before the accident, a sense of purpose aligned with passion, a future with meaning. Whatever challenges still lay ahead, that Valentine's Day breakthrough had shifted something fundamental for both horse and rider. Some partnerships are formed through circumstance, but sustained by choice. Today, Phoenix had made his choice clear. 1 year after that fateful October day at the Golden Gate Equestrian Auction, Sunrise Meadows Farm was transformed. The modest rehabilitation facility had expanded to include a new covered arena specifically designed for adaptive riding, complete with mounting ramps, specialized equipment, and safety features that made equestrian activities accessible to riders with various disabilities. On this crisp autumn morning, Caitlin sat astride Phoenix in the center of this arena, directing him through a complex pattern of movements using subtle weight shifts and voice commands. The former racehorse moved with fluid grace, his responses to her cues immediate and willing, his once injured leg showing no trace of the lameness that had nearly condemned him to slaughter. "Excellent lateral work," called Diane Holbrook from her position at the side of the arena. "Now transition to collected trot, then extend on the diagonal." Phoenix responded to Caitlin's barely perceptible signals, gathering himself into a balanced, elevated trot before stretching into a ground-covering extension that showcased his natural athleticism. The harmony between horse and rider made it easy to forget the extraordinary circumstances of their partnership. A paralyzed teenager and a horse once deemed dangerous and broken. "That's enough for today," Diane announced after they completed the pattern. "You're both ready for next week's demonstration." The Second Chances showcase had grown from Caitlin's simple idea into a major regional event, scheduled to coincide with the one-year anniversary of Phoenix's rescue. The demonstration would feature several horse rider pairs from Sunrise Meadows' new adaptive riding program, culminating with Caitlin and Phoenix performing a para-dressage routine they had spent months perfecting. As Caitlin cooled Phoenix down, with a relaxed walk around the arena perimeter, Jessica entered, accompanied by a young woman in a wheelchair and her parents. "Caitlin, this is Zoe Williams," Jessica introduced. "She's interested in joining our program." 16-year-old Zoe looked up at Caitlin with undisguised admiration. "I saw your video online, the one where Phoenix first accepted you as his rider. It made me think maybe I could ride again too." "How long since your injury?" Caitlin asked, guiding Phoenix to stand beside Zoe's wheelchair. 8 months. Car accident." Zoe gestured to her legs. "Complete T12. They said I'd never ride again." Caitlin smiled, recognizing the familiar ache in those words. "People say a lot of things about what's impossible. Sometimes they're wrong." She extended her hand, offering Zoe a chance to greet Phoenix. The stallion, once fearful of strangers, lowered his head gently to the girl's level, his soft muzzle investigating her outstretched palm with delicate curiosity. "He likes you," Caitlin noted. "Would you like to start lessons next week? We have several horses trained for adaptive riding, each with their own specialties." The hope that bloomed across Zoe's face was answer enough. After Phoenix was untracked, groomed, and settled in his stall with a well-earned treat, Caitlin joined Jessica in the office to review final arrangements for the upcoming showcase. The small room had become the hub of an operation far more complex than their original horse rehabilitation program. "The governor confirmed she'll attend," Jessica reported, checking her calendar, "along with representatives from 3 major equine therapy organizations and that documentary filmmaker from PBS. "No pressure," Caitlin remarked with a wry smile. A knock on the doorframe interrupted them. Marcus appeared, holding a manila envelope. "Special delivery from Dr. Abrams," he announced, handing it to Caitlin. Inside was an advance copy of the veterinary journal featuring Phoenix's case study. The article, co-authored by Dr. Abrams and Dr. Walsh, documented his groundbreaking treatment and rehabilitation, including detailed discussion of the psychological dimensions of his recovery. Accompanying the journal was a personal note from Dr. Abrams. "Caitlin, your presentation at last month's Equine Rehabilitation Conference was the highlight of the event. Your insights into trauma recovery from both human and equine perspectives have changed how many of us approach our work. Phoenix's case has been accepted as a model study in next year's veterinary curriculum. You've started something important here. Keep going." Craig Abrams, DVM. The professional recognition was gratifying, but even more meaningful was the transformation of Sunrise Meadows itself. With grant funding secured through their growing reputation and the continuing success of the Phoenix Rising campaign, the farm now employed 4 full-time staff and hosted regular training sessions for therapeutic riding instructors. 3 days a week, buses arrived carrying participants from rehabilitation centers and special education programs across the county. The original mission, giving discarded horses a second chance, had expanded to include humans seeking their own paths to recovery. Each partnership was unique, but all shared the core principle Caitlin and Phoenix had demonstrated: mutual healing through connection and purpose. The evening before the showcase, as sunset painted the autumn sky in brilliant hues, Caitlin found herself once again sitting beside Phoenix's stall, reminiscing about the journey that had led them here. "Remember when you wouldn't even leave the trailer?" she asked him, scratching his favorite spot behind his ears. "Now look at you, the star of your own program, changing lives left and right." Phoenix nickered softly, pushing his head against her shoulder in the affectionate gesture that had become his hallmark. Whatever language barrier existed between species, their communication had transcended it long ago. Mitchell Reynolds appeared in the stable doorway, Emma beside him. Over the months, both had become regular fixtures at Sunrise Meadows, providing ongoing support and expertise as the program developed. "Mind if we join you?" Mitchell asked. "We brought something to mark the occasion." Emma carried a small package, wrapped in simple brown paper. "It arrived this morning. We thought you should have it before tomorrow's public event." Inside the package was a shadow box frame containing Phoenix's original racing halter, with his registration nameplate, Midnight Thunder, alongside a photograph of him winning the Kentucky Derby 4 years earlier. The accompanying note was from his original owner at Carlton Investments. "This belongs with him now, where his legacy continues in ways I never imagined. Thank you for seeing what we missed." "How did you get this?" Caitlin asked, deeply moved by the gesture. Mitchell smiled. "The racing world isn't that large. When word spread about what you've accomplished here, people took notice, even those who had written him off. The showcase the following day exceeded all expectations. Hundreds gathered to witness the demonstrations, from the youngest participants, taking their first supported rides, to the more advanced students performing complex patterns. Each pair represented a unique journey of adaptation and discovery, guided by the principles Caitlin had developed through her work with Phoenix. When their turn came, Caitlin and Phoenix entered the arena to thunderous applause. The former Racehorse, once deemed too dangerous to approach, now moved with the centered calm of an animal who had found his purpose. Together, they performed their para-dressage routine, a choreographed dance that highlighted not what had been lost, but what had been created in its place. As the final notes of their music faded, Phoenix halted at the center of the arena, standing perfectly square as Caitlin saluted the audience. The response was immediate and overwhelming, not just applause, but a standing ovation that acknowledged the deeper significance of what they witnessed. The triumph of possibility over limitation, of connection over isolation, of hope over despair. Later, after the crowds had departed and the day's excitement settled into contented exhaustion, Caitlin took Phoenix for a quiet walk along the orchard path that had become their favorite evening ritual. The autumn air carried the scent of apples and fallen leaves, a reminder of nature's cycles of loss and renewal. "We've come full circle," she told him, guiding him with the lightest touch on the specially designed reins. 1 year ago, everyone had given up on both of us. Now we're showing others what's possible. Phoenix's ears flicked toward her voice, his steps matching her wheelchair's pace with the intuitive synchronization they had developed. In the distance, lights glowed from the farmhouse windows, where Jessica was hosting a small celebration. For the staff and volunteers who had made the day's success possible, tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students, new horses in need of rehabilitation. The work they had begun would continue evolving, touching lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But tonight was for reflection, for honoring the journey that had led them from that desperate auction day to this moment of fulfillment. As darkness gathered and the first stars appeared overhead, Caitlin looked up at the magnificent animal walking beside her. Not a broken-down racehorse, not a dangerous discard, but a partner who had helped her redefine what healing truly meant. "You know something, Phoenix," she said softly. "They call what we do therapy, but it's really about recognition, seeing the whole being, not just the damaged parts. You saw me that way from the beginning." Phoenix lowered his head to her level, his breath warm in the cooling evening air. In his dark eyes, Caitlin saw reflected not what they had survived, but what they had become, not defined by their limitations, but by the courage to move beyond them, one step at a time, together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.